Thank you so much for joining me again. This month, the design for the One Stitch at a Time Club is the bowl of pears and cherries. So here I have stitched it up using a variety of colors from Valdani. And I'm going to show you another way to stitch this up. And I will also show you how to do these different stitches. Although I have to say this month it's mostly just stem stitch, running stitch. Some of these little guys are actually fly stitches. So it's pretty simple this month. So the second way I wanted to do this was on a piece of linen. This is beautiful mochi, however you say it, linen. And the first thing I did was I copied the pattern onto a piece of freezer paper. So I just printed it out on the paper side, ironed the wax side on. And as you can see, I didn't use the reverse image. So these two are actually going opposite directions, but it really doesn't matter. It works both ways since there's no writing or anything directional. So this one, I thought I would color in, and I picked out some different colored pencils that I'd try. So I think I'm gonna do the pear in a couple of shades, mostly this kind of golden color, and then I'm going to add some green to it. So the trick with colored pencils, or what I find makes it much easier, is if you leave that freezer paper on the back, because then it stabilizes the fabric and makes it easier to draw on. You always want to test in an inconspicuous place your colors to make sure you have a color that you like. And please, please, please feel free to use any colors you'd like. The trick is to use a small sorry, I can't talk and do this at the same time, I guess. Just small little marks and fairly light. You don't want to press too hard on there. And you can always go back in and add more pressure to add a darker color, or actually build up with layers is a good way to do it too. But I kind of want this one to be a little light and subtle, so I'm not going to go too dark on it. It also helps not to have a super sharp pencil. It's helpful to have just kind of a flat side on the pencil. And this is one that I traced using the Pilot friction pen. So all the lines will disappear with the heat of an iron after I finish my stitching. Okay, so I've got a first coat of that on there. And I think it might be kind of fun to add just a little bit of green too, because they're not all one color. And if you just start light, and you can always work your way up. If you start dark, you can't take it away. So it's always better to do on the lighter side. That's kind of pretty. Maybe a little up here too. Okay, so it's as simple as that, really. I'm going to do this red cherry. I think I'm going to color the whole thing in. Oh, another idea too that you could do with the cherry, even with the pears, you could make a little highlight. So say the highlight is right there. You could leave a little area where there isn't any color, and it would look like it's the light reflecting on it. If you want, you can try that. If you don't like it, you can always go back in and color it in. So after you get these all colored, you'll need to set that. So once you have it all colored in, you're going to want to set the colors, because these will rub off with your hand as you're stitching. So a product like this, it's Jacquard Textile Color, it's Colorless Extender. And I found this on Amazon. You can find it at craft stores. I'm not sure if Michael's has it or not. And you can just apply a very light coat, because it will make it a little bit thicker. So you don't want to pile it on there because you're going to be stitching through it. So just a very light coat, and then you let that dry before you stitch. And sometimes I even water it down just a little bit. I have tried washing these a little bit, not in a washing machine, but just by hand in a sink with soap and water. And it's really sets the color pretty well. I think, okay, so I'm on the bowl. I think I'm just going to do all blue, kind of like I did in the other stitchery. And the inspiration for this came from a little teacup that belonged to my grandma. I was visiting my mom and I told her I wanted to do a little design on the china, and she has this beautiful collection of china with different images on it, and I saw this one and thought, oh, that's perfect. So this is the little teacup that was my inspiration. Isn't that darling? It's so, so sweet. So as you can tell, it doesn't look exactly like that. I put my little spin on it, but you know, inspiration's all around you. All right, well, after I get this colored in and I have it, the color set and it's dried, then I'll be ready to stitch, and I'll show you how I do some of these stitches. Here we have the design all colored, and then I went ahead and went over it with the fixative so that it didn't rub off. If I hadn't done that, this would be all smeared and just a tint of the color. It really comes off unless you do fix it. So I've done quite a bit of the stitching. I've just left a few different spots that I'll show you. So one of the areas is this leaf, and that is a running stitch, which is super simple, probably the simplest stitch. And what I'm using is DMC, and it is number 535. And I'm only using one strand because I wanted it to be really fine. And this color reminded me of graphite, so I wanted it to kind of look like it was drawn on, and kind of like a coloring book, if you will. So running stitch, just up and down, up and down. And as you could tell on here, I went ahead and just traced a solid line. And then when I iron it, the line will disappear. And so I'm going to tie a knot and then tie another knot a little bit above that, cut in between, and now my thread is ready to go. So there's a few more running stitches over on the pear. And one thing I did notice too is after coloring it in, some of my lines were a little bit harder to see, so I went ahead and drew over the lines again just to help with that. So you just go up on one end, down, up at the beginning of the next stitch, down at the end, up at the beginning. Super, super simple. And I just like that it adds just a little bit of dimension to it. I tried to make it, you know, have the pear look like it's not flat. Okay, so we'll finish these up and then I'll show you the stem stitch. So all of the solid lines are going to be done using a stem stitch. And to do a stem stitch, you're always going to start on an end, so not in the middle of a line, but where it ends and begins. Pull your needle up, and because this has this curve to it, I'm going to carry my thread the same direction of the curve. So I'm going to carry the thread up, not down. So I'm going to carry my thread up, and I'm going to take an 1/8, come back a 1/16, and that's the first stitch. Now from now on, I want to go an 1/8 and come back up in the very same hole. And you always just want to be consistent on which side you're carrying your thread. My mom started doing these with even a shorter stitch than a 1/16, and it looks really cool, but oh my goodness, I tried it and it takes twice as long, obviously. So I'm sticking with my 1/16 of an inch. Okay, and that is how you do the stem stitch. Okay, to work on the bowl, the flowers are just little fly stitches with some straight stitches inside the center. And then these little buds, I'll do this little bud over here. you start at the base of the bud, and these are just 3 individual stitches. So one up one side, I cross over, down the other side, and I go back up, and then across the top. So there's the little triangle at the base, and then the little bud part is going to be a fly stitch. So in fly stitch, I'm going to start at one side at the base, curve the thread up and around, take my needle down the other side at the base, the needle up at the tip, thread under the needle, and then just tack it in place. So the needle goes down right on the other side of the thread. And that is how you do those little buds. So for the flowers, it's the same thing. I'm just going to take the needle up on one side of a little petal, down on the other, take my needle up on the tip of the petal, the thread goes under the needle, and then I tack it in place. Now the little leaves on here, those are stem stitched. And this was an area where once I colored it in, I really lost where my lines were. So this one might not look exactly like the other one or the pattern, but that's okay. So now I'm just going to make those little tiny stitches on the inside, and those are just individual little stitches. I think we have one more fly stitch over here for this little guy. I think I got them all. So that flower's done. Kai scissors, my favorite little tiny scissors. I have them if you want them. Okay, so now the bird wing, I went ahead and I stitched this, just a little stem stitch going up to here. Now all these little feathers, those are individual little fly stitches. So this is a pretty simple pattern because we only have the stem stitch, the fly stitch, and the running stitch. There's not a lazy daisy or a French knot. So if you're just joining us on our monthly stitcheries, this is probably a really good one because it's pretty darn easy. I really, really like the way it looks to use the color pencil on this linen. This modal linen is just gorgeous. I have more on order, but it must be popular because it was back ordered on Moda. But it is coming, and I have other plans for it because it's just so pretty. And I just think the colors look so soft on it. And we just have 2 more little feathers, and this little guy will be done. Maybe I'll make him into a pillow or something. A little mini pillow. Okay, there we go. So I hope you like the pears and the cherries in the bowl. And next month, there might be a squirrel involved, just warning you. So anyway, thank you again for being part of this journey, and happy stitching. Bye.